I wasn't expecting anything unusual that night. It was just a regular Tuesday. I came home from work, dinner was already on the table, and the house had that cozy, familiar feeling. But something felt off. Mia wasn't acting like herself. She looked like she was carrying a weight that I couldn't see. Her eyes seemed distant, her smile forced. After dinner, she asked me if we could talk. I thought it would be about something small. Maybe she wanted to change something about the house, or maybe she was stressed about work. But when we sat down in the living room, she started to cry, and my heart sank. I could tell whatever she was about to say was serious. She reached for my hand, squeezing it so tightly that it hurt. "Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I did something really wrong. I braced myself, trying to stay calm. I tried to be the supportive husband she needed, even though a million scenarios rushed through my mind. Did she get into trouble at work? Was she sick? But then she said it, the words that would change everything. "I cheated on you." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My heart felt like it had stopped beating, and time itself seemed to freeze. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. My world cracked open, and everything I believed about us seemed to slip through that sudden fracture. She let go of my hand, wiping her eyes, her tears falling freely. She told me it happened once. It was a mistake. She regretted it more than anything she had ever done. "It was with someone I knew from work," she said, her voice trembling. "It was a stupid, impulsive mistake. I don't even know why I did it, but I knew the second it happened that I'd destroyed everything." I sat there in silence, trying to wrap my head around it. I had imagined so many worst-case scenarios over the years, but this wasn't something I had ever thought would happen to us. I loved Mia, trusted her with everything. She was my best friend, my partner in every sense of the word. And now everything felt tainted. She cried harder when I didn't respond. "I hate myself for what I did, Jack. I love you so much. I need you to know that I'm sorry." It was like I was hearing her from underwater. Her words felt muffled, far away. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she would do this to us, to me. But I just sat there, feeling empty. Eventually, I managed to say, "Why are you telling me this now?" She looked at me, her eyes red and full of pain. "Because I love you, and I can't live with this lie between us. You deserve to know the truth, even if it means losing you." Those words hit me harder than anything else. She was right, I did deserve the truth. But hearing it, knowing that the person I loved more than anything had betrayed me, I couldn't process it. I stood up, feeling unsteady, my legs weak beneath me. "I need some time," I said, my voice sounding hollow. Mia nodded, wiping her face, her lips trembling. "Take as long as you need. I understand." I walked out of the room, out of the house, not even knowing where I was going. I just needed air. I needed to be away from her, from the reminders of everything we'd built together. I wandered the neighborhood for what felt like hours, replaying her words in my mind. The love of my life, the person I thought I'd grow old with, had betrayed me. And yet, part of me still loved her, still wanted to believe that we could somehow come back from this. But how do you forgive something like that? How do you rebuild the trust when it's been shattered into a million pieces? I had no answers, only questions that seemed to echo endlessly in my mind. I didn't go back home that night. I couldn't face Mia, couldn't look at the place that held so many memories for us. I ended up at a motel on the other side of town, a small, run-down place that didn't ask too many questions. I checked in, took the key from the old man behind the counter, and went to my room. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall. My mind kept replaying the moment she said those words. "I cheated on you." It felt like a bad dream, one that I was desperate to wake up from. I thought about all the times I told Mia how much she meant to me, how I couldn't imagine my life without her. I thought about our wedding day, the vows we made to each other, the promise that we'd always be there for one another. And now everything felt broken. The room was dark, the only light coming from the dim lamp on the bedside table. I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside, the occasional sound of a car passing by. It was a strange kind of silence, one that made me feel more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. I wanted to call someone, to talk to someone who might understand, but I didn't know who to reach out to. I didn't want to tell anyone what had happened. I didn't want people to know that my marriage, the thing I'd been so proud of, was falling apart. I thought about calling Mia, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I needed space, needed time to think. I knew she was probably at home, waiting for me, wondering if I'd ever come back. And part of me hated that she was hurting, even after what she'd done. I hated that I still cared about her, that I still loved her despite everything. Eventually, I lay down on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind wouldn't let me rest, wouldn't let me escape the reality of what had happened. I kept thinking about the man she'd been with, wondering who he was, what he had that I didn't. I kept thinking about the moment she decided to betray me, wondering if there was something I could have done to prevent it. Was it my fault? Had I missed the signs? Was there something I could have done differently? The questions kept coming, each one more painful than the last. I felt like I was drowning, like I was being pulled under by the weight of everything I didn't understand. I wanted to hate Mia, wanted to be angry at her, but all I felt was sadness, a deep, aching sadness that seemed to consume me from the inside out. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted, my eyes heavy and my head pounding. I knew I couldn't stay in that motel forever. I had to face Mia at some point, had to decide what came next. But I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I could look at her without seeing the betrayal, without feeling the pain all over again. I checked out of the motel, driving aimlessly for a while. I ended up at a park we used to go to when we first started dating. It was empty, the early morning fog still hanging in the air. I sat on a bench, watching the fog slowly lift, and tried to think about what I wanted. I tried to imagine a future where Mia and I could move past this, where we could rebuild what we'd lost. But it felt impossible. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces that I wasn't sure could ever be put back together. I knew Mia was waiting for me. I knew I had to face her eventually, to talk to her, to decide if there was anything left to save. But I was scared. Scared of what I'd see in her eyes, scared of the pain that would come with facing the truth. I took a deep breath, trying to gather the strength I needed, and decided to go home. When I walked through the door, Mia was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up at me, her expression filled with a mix of hope and fear. She stood up, taking a tentative step towards me. "Jack," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, looking at her, trying to see the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd promised to spend my life with. But all I could see was the betrayal, the hurt that had torn us apart. "I don't know if I can do this, Mia," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Tears filled her eyes, and she nodded, her lips trembling. "I understand. I know I messed everything up. But I love you, Jack. I love you more than anything, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could find a way to move past this, that our love was strong enough to survive even this. But I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I was strong enough to forgive, to trust her again. "I need time," I said, my voice breaking. "I need time to figure out if I can forgive you." Mia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting. I'll do whatever it takes." I turned away, heading up the stairs to our bedroom. I needed space, needed to be alone to think. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Mia start to cry again, her sobs echoing through the house. It broke my heart to hear her like that, but I knew I couldn't comfort her. Not now. Not when I was still trying to figure out if I could ever forgive her for what she'd done. I stayed in the bedroom for what felt like hours, staring at the walls, lost in thought. The house was too quiet. The silence made it impossible to escape my own mind, and every little thing reminded me of what we used to be. Pictures of us together on the dresser, her perfume lingering in the air, the blanket she always wrapped herself in on cold mornings. It all felt like a punch to the gut. I kept thinking about the day we moved in here, how excited we were to start our life together. We had painted these walls ourselves, laughing when we ended up with more paint on each other than on the walls. It was one of those perfect days that I thought we'd have forever. And now all of those memories felt tainted. I wondered if Mia thought about those moments, if they still mattered to her the way they did to me. After a while, I knew I couldn't just stay up here forever. I needed to figure out what I wanted, and staying away from her wasn't helping. I decided to go downstairs and talk to Mia again, to try to understand why she had done this to us. Maybe if I could understand, it wouldn't hurt so much. Maybe if I knew what had gone wrong, I could see a path forward. When I went back downstairs, Mia was still on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, though it wasn't even on. She looked up when she heard me, her eyes red and swollen. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice softer than before. Mia nodded, sitting up straighter. "Of course. I want to talk. I want to tell you everything." I sat down across from her, taking a deep breath. "I need to know why, Mia. I need to understand why you did it." She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. "I don't know if I have a good answer, Jack. I wish I did. I've been asking myself the same thing ever since it happened." She paused, her voice cracking. I think I felt lost. We've been together for so long, and I love you, but I started to feel like I didn't know who I was anymore. It doesn't make it right. Nothing makes it right. But I think I was trying to feel something, trying to prove to myself that I still mattered. I listened, trying to make sense of her words. I knew relationships could be complicated, that people sometimes did things they didn't even understand themselves. But it was hard to hear her say that she'd felt lost, that she hadn't felt like herself. I had always thought I knew her better than anyone, that I could see her even when she couldn't see herself. But maybe I'd missed something. Maybe I hadn't been there for her the way she needed me to be. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I asked, my voice full of hurt. "Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling?" Mia wiped her eyes, her shoulders slumping. "I didn't want to burden you. You've always been so good to me, Jack. You've always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. I didn't want you to see me like that, to see how lost I felt. And then, before I knew it, I'd made the worst mistake of my life." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I love you, that I've never stopped loving you. What I did, it had nothing to do with you. It was about me, about my own insecurities. And I hate myself for hurting you." I could see the pain in her eyes, the regret that seemed to be eating her alive. I knew she meant what she was saying, that she was truly sorry for what she had done. But the hurt was still there, deep inside me, and I didn't know if I could let it go. "I want to believe you, Mia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe that we can get past this. But I don't know how. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Mia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and if you can't, I'll understand. I just want you to know that I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy, I'll work on myself, I'll do anything. I just want a chance to make it right." I looked at her, seeing the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I had promised to spend my life with. I could see how broken she was, how much she wanted to fix what she had broken. And part of me wanted to give her that chance, to believe that we could find a way to move forward together. But another part of me was scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of putting my heart back in her hands. "I don't know if I'm ready to make any decisions yet," I said, my voice trembling. "I need time, Mia. I need time to figure out if I can forgive you, if I can trust you again." She nodded, her eyes full of pain. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting. I'm not going anywhere." We sat there in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging between us. I didn't know what the future held for us. Didn't know if we could ever get back to what we had. But I knew that I still loved her, despite everything. And maybe, just maybe, that love could be enough to help us find our way back to each other. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Mia and I lived in a strange kind of limbo, existing together in the same space, but feeling worlds apart. We weren't fighting, but we weren't exactly talking either. There was a constant tension hanging between us, the unspoken question of whether we'd ever be able to find our way back to each other. I stayed in the guest room most nights, I wasn't ready to sleep beside her. To share the same bed we'd shared for so many years. Felt like too much, too soon. I could tell Mia was struggling with it too. But she gave me the space I needed, never pushing, never demanding more than I could give. And that made it even harder. Seeing her trying so hard to make things right, even when I wasn't sure I could meet her halfway. One day, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee, Mia walked in, her expression hesitant. She paused, as if she was unsure whether to speak. "Jack," she finally said, her voice soft. "I've been thinking. I think we need help. Real help." I looked up at her, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, stepping closer. "I mean counseling, couples therapy. I know it's a lot to ask, and I understand if you're not ready. But I think if we're going to have any chance of getting through this, we need someone to help us. Someone who can help us figure out how to talk to each other again." I stared at her for a moment, her words sinking in. Therapy had never really been something I'd considered. I'd always thought that we could handle whatever came our way on our own, that our love would be enough to get us through anything. But maybe that was naive. Maybe this was too big for us to handle on our own. And if there was even a small chance that it could help us find our way back, wasn't it worth trying? "I don't know, Mia," I said, my voice unsure. "I don't know if talking to someone else is going to change anything." She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "I know. And if you're not ready, I understand. But I just want to try. I don't want to give up on us, Jack. And if there's even a chance that therapy could help, I think we should take it." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Part of me wanted to say no, to reject the idea and keep my walls up. But another part of me, the part that still loved Mia, that still wanted to find a way to move past this, knew that we needed help. We couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. "Okay," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll go. I'll try." The relief on Mia's face was immediate. She stepped closer, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you, Jack. I promise I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do anything to make this right." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wasn't sure if this would work, if therapy could really help us heal. But I was willing to try. I owed it to myself and maybe even to Mia to at least give it a chance. A few days later, we had our first therapy session. The counselor, Dr. Hayes, was a kind-looking woman in her 50s, with a calm demeanor that put me at ease, even though I was nervous. Mia and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, the distance between us feeling like a physical representation of everything we'd lost. Dr. Hayes smiled at us, her eyes kind. "Thank you both for being here today. I know it's not easy, but the fact that you're both willing to be here says a lot." I nodded, not really knowing what to say. Mia glanced at me, her expression full of hope, and it made my chest tighten. I wanted to be hopeful too, but I was still so scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of putting my heart back in her hands. Dr. Hayes started by asking us to talk about what had happened, how we were feeling. Mia went first, her voice shaky as she spoke about her regret, her guilt, and her love for me. She talked about how she'd lost herself, how she'd made a terrible mistake, but how much she wanted to make things right. I could see how much it hurt her to talk about it, but I also knew that it needed to be said. We couldn't move forward without facing the pain head-on. When it was my turn to speak, I hesitated. I wasn't used to talking about my feelings, especially not in front of a stranger. But Dr. Hayes was patient, giving me the time I needed to find the words. "I feel betrayed," I finally said, my voice cracking. I trusted Mia more than anyone, and now that trust is gone. I don't know how to get it back. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Mia looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I know, Jack. I know I broke your trust, and I hate myself for it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back, even if it takes the rest of my life." Dr. Hayes nodded, her expression thoughtful. Rebuilding trust is one of the hardest things to do after a betrayal. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to be vulnerable again. But it is possible, if both of you are willing to put in the work. I listened, her words both comforting and terrifying. I wanted to believe that we could rebuild what we'd lost, that we could find a way back to each other. But I also knew that it wouldn't be easy, that it would take time and effort, and that there were no guarantees. The session ended with Dr. Hayes giving us some exercises to work on, ways to communicate, to express our feelings without shutting each other out. It felt strange, almost mechanical, but I knew that if we were going to have any chance of moving forward, we needed to start somewhere. On the drive home, Mia reached over, her fingers brushing against mine. I hesitated for a moment before taking her hand, the warmth of her touch both familiar and foreign. She looked at me, her eyes full of hope, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope too. Maybe we could find our way back. Maybe, just maybe, love could be enough. The first few therapy sessions were awkward. I wasn't used to sitting down and talking about my feelings, especially not in front of a stranger. But Dr. Hayes made it easier. She didn't judge us, didn't take sides. Instead, she helped us understand why we felt the way we did, why we were struggling, and what we could do to start healing. Mia and I began to talk more at home, too. At first, it was just about simple things, the kind of things we used to talk about before everything fell apart. What we wanted for dinner, what happened at work, the kind of small talk that felt normal. It was almost comforting, in a way, to have those moments of normalcy. They reminded me of who we used to be, of the life we'd built together. One night, we were sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner. It was quiet, the only sound the clinking of our forks against the plates. I looked at Mia, her face still etched with worry, and I realized how exhausted she looked. The past few weeks had taken a toll on both of us, and I could see it in her eyes. She had been doing everything she could to show me that she was still here, that she was still committed to us, but I hadn't really acknowledged it. I hadn't told her how much I appreciated her efforts, even if I still didn't know if I could fully forgive her. "Mia," I said, breaking the silence. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. I want you to know that I see how hard you're trying. I know this hasn't been easy, and I know I haven't been the easiest person to be around. But I appreciate it. I appreciate you." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as she took mine. "Thank you, Jack. That means so much to me. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm so grateful that you're still here, that you're still willing to try." I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. It was a small step, but it felt important. Felt like maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal. Over the next few weeks, we continued our therapy sessions. Dr. Hayes helped us work through our feelings, helped us communicate in ways that felt productive instead of hurtful. I learned to open up about my pain, about the anger and betrayal that still lingered inside me. And Mia listened, really listened. She didn't try to defend herself, didn't make excuses. She just listened, and it made a difference. It made me feel like maybe she truly understood the depth of what she'd done. We also started working on rebuilding trust little by little. Mia was transparent about everything, where she was going, who she was with, even sharing her phone without me asking. It felt strange at first, almost like she was trying too hard, but I realized that it was her way of showing me that she had nothing to hide, that she was willing to do whatever it took to earn back my trust. One weekend, we decided to go for a walk in the park, a place that used to be our favorite before everything fell apart. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that made everything feel a little lighter. As we walked, Mia reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. I hesitated for a moment before giving in, letting her hold my hand. We walked in silence for a while, the sound of birds chirping and the breeze rustling the leaves filling the air. It felt almost normal, almost like the old days. I could feel the tension in my chest start to ease, just a little bit. It was a small moment, but it felt like progress. It felt like maybe we were starting to find our way back to each other. As we sat down on a bench, Mia looked at me, her eyes full of emotion. "Jack, I know I've said this 1,000 times, but I really am sorry. I hate what I did, and I hate that I hurt you. But I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. I could see how much she meant it, how much she was willing to do to make things right. And in that moment, I realized that I wanted to give her that chance. I wanted to believe that we could move forward, that we could build something new from the pieces of what we'd lost. I'm not ready to say that everything is okay, I said, my voice steady. But I am ready to try. I still love you, Mia, and I want to see if we can find our way back. Tears filled her eyes and she smiled. A real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in a long time. That's all I want, Jack. Just a chance. We sat there on the bench, holding hands, watching as people walked by, children playing in the distance. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when the hurt resurfaced, when I wondered if I was making the right choice. But there were also moments like this, moments when I could see a glimmer of hope, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could be okay again. That night, for the first time since everything had happened, I decided to sleep in our bedroom again. Mia looked at me, her eyes widening in surprise when I walked in with my pillow. She didn't say anything, but the smile on her face said it all. She moved over, giving me space, and I lay down beside her, feeling the warmth of her body next to mine. It wasn't easy. Lying there, I felt the weight of everything we'd been through, the pain that still lingered. But I also felt something else, hope. Hope that maybe, with time, we could heal. Hope that maybe love was enough to see us through, even the darkest of times. Mia reached for my hand under the covers, her fingers brushing against mine. I hesitated for a moment before intertwining my fingers with hers, feeling the warmth of her touch. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It was a promise that I was willing to try, that I wasn't ready to give up on us just yet. Sleeping beside Mia again felt like both a step forward and a challenge. Each night, I battled the conflicting emotions inside me. There were moments when I'd wake up in the middle of the night, the old doubts rushing back, the memories of her betrayal flashing through my mind. But then I'd look at her, asleep next to me, and I'd see the woman I'd loved for so many years, the woman who was trying so hard to make things right. And I'd remember why I was still here, why I was giving this a chance. Mia was doing everything she could to earn back my trust. She was open about everything, where she was going, who she was with, even what she was thinking. At first, it felt strange, almost like she was overcompensating. But over time, I began to see it differently. She wasn't trying to prove herself to me out of guilt or fear. She was doing it out of love. She wanted me to feel safe with her again, and she was willing to be vulnerable, to do whatever it took to make that happen. One night, as we were lying in bed, Mia turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "Jack," she said, her voice soft. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, my heart pounding slightly. I never knew what to expect when she asked questions like that. "What is it? Do you think we'll ever be okay again?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Do you think you'll ever be able to trust me completely?" I took a deep breath, considering her question. It was something I'd thought about a lot, something that had weighed heavily on my mind. Trust was such a fragile thing, and once it was broken, it was hard, maybe even impossible, to rebuild. But I also knew that I wanted to try. I wanted to believe that we could get back to a place where I could look at her and not feel that pang of doubt. "I don't know, Mia," I said honestly. "I wish I could say yes, that I could promise everything will go back to the way it was. But I don't think that's possible. I think things will be different. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to go back to how things were. Maybe we just need to figure out how to move forward, how to build something new." Mia nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "I understand, and I'm okay with that. I just want us to be okay, whatever that looks like. I want you to be happy, Jack. I want to make you happy again." I reached over, brushing a tear from her cheek. "We're working on it," I said, my voice gentle. "And that's enough for now." She smiled, her eyes filled with hope, and I felt a warmth in my chest. A warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when the hurt resurfaced, when I wondered if I was making the right choice. But there were also moments like this, moments when I could see the love we still had for each other, the love that had survived even the darkest of times. We continued our therapy sessions with Dr. Hayes, and they began to feel less like a chore and more like a lifeline. She helped us navigate the difficult conversations, helped us understand each other in ways we hadn't before. I realized that I had my own role in what had happened. Not that I was to blame for Mia's choices, but that I hadn't always been as present as I should have been. I had taken our relationship for granted, assuming that love was enough to keep us strong without the need for constant effort. And I saw now how wrong I had been. One day, during a session, Dr. Hayes asked us to write letters to each other. Letters that expressed our feelings, our hopes, and our fears. It felt strange at first, almost childish, but I knew that it was important. Writing allowed me to say the things I couldn't say out loud, the things that were too raw, too vulnerable to put into spoken words. I spent hours on my letter, pouring my heart onto the page. I wrote about my pain, my anger, but also about my love for Mia, the love that had kept me here, even when I wanted to walk away. I wrote about my hope that we could find a way to move forward, that we could build something new from the pieces of what we'd lost. When the day came to share our letters, I was nervous. I wasn't used to being so open, so vulnerable. But as I read my letter to Mia, I saw the way her eyes filled with tears, the way she listened to every word as if it were the most important thing she'd ever heard. And when she read her letter to me, I felt the sincerity in her words, the depth of her regret and her love. It was raw, it was painful, but it was also beautiful. It was a reminder of why we were still here, why we were still fighting for each other. After that session, something shifted between us. It wasn't that everything was suddenly okay. It wasn't. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the past felt too heavy to bear. But there were also moments of connection, moments when I could see a future for us that wasn't defined by what had happened. A future where we could be happy again, even if it looked different from what we had once imagined. One evening, Mia surprised me with a picnic in the backyard. She had set up a blanket, lit some candles, and made my favorite meal, spaghetti with homemade marinara sauce. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. It was her way of showing me that she still knew me, that she still cared about the little things that made me happy. As we sat there, eating under the stars, I looked at Mia, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the candles. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I realized that maybe we didn't need to rush, that maybe it was okay to take things one day at a time. We didn't need to have all the answers right now. We just needed to keep trying, to keep choosing each other, even when it was hard. Mia, I said, my voice soft, I know we still have a long way to go, but I want you to know that I'm glad we're still here. I'm glad we're still fighting for us. She smiled, her eyes filled with tears. Me too, Jack. I love you. I'll always love you. I love you too, I said, the words feeling both familiar and new. They weren't just words, they were a promise. A promise to keep trying, to keep fighting, to keep choosing each other, even when it wasn't easy. As we sat there under the stars, I felt a sense of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. It wouldn't be perfect. It wouldn't be the same as it once was. But it could be something new, something stronger, something that was worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could make it. I believed that love, even a love that had been tested and broken, could still be enough. As the days turned into weeks, Mia and I settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't the same as it used to be, but that was okay. We had learned to accept that the past couldn't be erased, and we couldn't simply return to how things were. Instead, we focused on creating something new, something that was built on honesty, vulnerability, and a deep commitment to each other. There were still moments when the pain would rear its head, moments when I'd feel the familiar pang of doubt. Sometimes it was triggered by something small, a random memory, a song on the radio, a place we used to go. But instead of shutting down, instead of letting the hurt take over, I started to talk to Mia about it. It wasn't easy at first. It felt uncomfortable, exposing those wounds, but every time I did, Mia listened with patience and love. She never got defensive, never tried to justify what she had done. She just listened, and it made all the difference. One evening, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie together. It was one of our old favorites, the kind of movie we used to watch when we just wanted to relax and forget about the world. As I looked at Mia, her head resting on my shoulder, I realized how far we'd come. There was a time when I didn't think I'd ever be able to sit beside her like this again. a time when the thought of being close to her felt impossible. But here we were, and it felt right. It felt like maybe we were finally finding our way back to each other. "Mia," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and curious. "What is it?" I want you to know that I'm proud of us. I'm proud of how far we've come," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know it hasn't been easy, and I know we still have a long way to go, but I'm glad we're still here. I'm glad we're still fighting for each other." Mia's eyes filled with tears, and she reached up to cup my cheek. "Jack, I feel the same way. I know I hurt you, and I know I can never take back what I did. But I promise you, with everything I have, that I will spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you. I will never stop fighting for us." I leaned down, pressing my forehead against hers. "I love you, Mia, and I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to build something new with you." She smiled, her tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you too, Jack. More than anything." From that moment on, something shifted between us. It was as if a weight had been lifted, as if the walls that had been between us were finally starting to come down. We began to laugh more, to find joy in the little things again. We started to make new memories, going on hikes, cooking meals together, taking spontaneous trips to places we'd never been. It wasn't about trying to recreate the past. It was about creating a new future, one that was uniquely ours. One weekend, Mia suggested that we take a trip to the beach. It was a place we used to go to often, a place that held so many happy memories for us. At first, I hesitated. The beach had always been a place where we felt carefree, where we could escape from the world and just be together. I wasn't sure if I was ready to revisit those memories, to face the happiness that had once been ours. But then I realized that maybe that was exactly what we needed. We needed to confront the past, to acknowledge the good times we'd had and accept that, while things were different now, we could still find joy together. So we packed a bag, loaded up the car, and headed to the beach. As we walked along the shoreline, the sun setting in the distance, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the salty breeze in the air. It all felt familiar, comforting. I looked over at Mia, her hair blowing in the wind, and I realized that I was finally starting to feel whole again. We spread out a blanket on the sand and sat down, watching as the sky turned shades of pink and orange. Mia reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine, and I didn't hesitate. I held her hand tightly, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. "Jack," Mia said, her voice soft, "thank you for being here with me. Thank you for giving us another chance." I turned to her, my heart swelling with emotion. "You don't need to thank me, Mia. We're in this together, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." She smiled, her eyes filled with love, and I knew that I meant every word. I didn't know what the future held for us. I didn't know if we would ever fully heal from what had happened, if the scars would ever fade completely. But I did know that I loved Mia, and that I wanted to keep fighting for us. I wanted to keep choosing her, every single day, no matter how hard it was. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I leaned over and kissed Mia, feeling the warmth of her lips against mine. It was a kiss filled with love, with hope, with the promise of a new beginning. And in that moment, I knew that we were going to be okay. We weren't perfect, and we never would be. But we were here together, and that was enough. The journey ahead of us was still uncertain. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But there would also be moments of joy, moments of love, moments when we would look at each other and know that every struggle had been worth it. We were building something new, something stronger, something more honest, something that was worth fighting for. As we sat there on the beach, the stars beginning to twinkle above us, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a hope that maybe, just maybe, love was enough. That even after everything we'd been through, even after the pain and the betrayal, we could still find our way back to each other. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could make it. I believed that we could have a future that was filled with love, with laughter, with the kind of happiness that only comes from weathering the storm together. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be perfect. but it would be ours. And that was enough. As I looked at Mia, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moon, I knew that I was ready. Ready to let go of the past. Ready to embrace whatever the future held for us. Ready to love her, fully and completely, without holding back. Because in the end, love wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. It was about forgiveness, about growth, about finding a way to move forward together. And as I held Mia's hand, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. I was ready for a new beginning, for a future filled with love and hope. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.